it's not doing very well. And particularly down in the south of our country, and particularly in Surrey, we are not doing very well. So that's the negative side. But we can change that, and we need to be positive. We need not to give up, and we need to go out there and get involved. Even doing little things at home can really make a difference. So here at Zero, we have monthly biodiversity meetings, usually around about the end of the month on a Wednesday evening. And we've got a lot of visits coming up in the summer as well, and they'll obviously be on different dates and things, usually the weekends, that sort of thing. So do look out for them. They'll be coming out in Guildford Environmental Newsletter, and there's the batch of the last lot of newsletter on the table there, and they're always coming up on our Zero Carbon screen there in the window, and you'll find them on the Zero Carbon Guildford website. And I've also printed off a list on that table of all our next meetings that are next due coming up. So do come and join us for some of those. So tonight it's really a great pleasure to introduce to you Peter Smith, a member of the Guildford Beekeeping Association, writer and amateur entomologist. And Peter is our very own beekeeper at Rosamond Community Gardens as well. So we're really lucky to have such a knowledgeable person to, oh yes, to help us look after our bees. And we're not just talking about honeybees, we're talking about wild bees, we're talking about the bumblebee, we're talking about all bees. So if you've never discovered Rosamond Community Garden, that's another place where you could really get active. Come and see what we do up there. The membership is so cheap, it's only £10 a year, and it's a no-dig permaculture garden, pretty much. And we have got our very own little bee bank going on there at the moment, which is one of the newest things that we've been getting involved in. So that's enough from me. I'm very excited to hand over to Peter. Thank you, Peter.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming out. Can you hear me okay? I've got this special device here because I've got quite a soft voice.
Yeah. Yep.
Bumblebees, as opposed to honeybees or solitary bees. If you ask most people, so nine people out of 10, say, can you describe a bee? They'll probably describe a honeybee. They'll say it's an animal that stings, that lives in a colony, that produces honey. But funny enough, if you ask people typically, can you draw a bee? They will draw a bumblebee. So this classic kind of nice bumblebee, barrel-shaped, hairy-shaped thing. And if you ask people what are things you're most worried about in the environment, well, actually, in a recent YouGov poll, the fate of bees was probably the biggest item, above fracking, above air pollution, above many things. But people tend to think of that as the honeybee. There's a general perception that the honeybee is in danger, that when the honeybee disappears, we'll all die. Well, we won't. We won't. There's lots of things that bees don't pollinate, but they're all things like Brussels sprouts and turnips. Anyway, but the honeybee has somehow been associated, become to be the kind of poster girl for a lot of environmental issues, and it's seen that the honeybee is actually in danger, and it's not. It's got beekeepers like me or Pauline or anybody else keep bees here? Oh no, I hate an audience full of beekeepers. They are not actually in danger. Bumblebees are in danger. Bumblebees are in a lot of trouble. Bumblebees are not as highly evolved as honeybees. Honeybees have been around for about 100 million years. Bumblebees only for about 30 million. It kind of dwarfs what we've been around for, obviously. Bumblebees are different to honeybees in lots of ways, which I'll explain in a bit. But they are basically what you can see here. They're shaped like a barrel, and they're hairy. They're unlike a honeybee, which is not hairy. if you were to shave all that hair off, underneath you'd find them to be shiny black. But we don't recommend you do that because it makes them really irritable and very hard to identify. Because you identify them by the colours of the hairs. The reason they're so hairy is they actually developed in the Himalayas when the Himalayas wasn't quite as high as it is now, but nonetheless very cold. So that they're adapted to cold weather, which is a key point for bumblebees. This is a common carder bumblebee, Bombus pasquarum, the bumblebee of the pastures, which is right, a lovely name. And in the UK there are 24 species of bumblebee. 2 have gone extinct, 1 has been introduced from France, which you have living in your bird box. 9 of them are threatened, and only 8 of our species of bumblebees could actually be described as common, which is a bit of a worry. They haven't always been called bumblebees. Bumblebee is a early 20th century word. And there's lots of different words that are still used in dialect terms. In parts of Scotland we have the foggy bummer and the foggy toddler. What the difference is, I don't even know how to pronounce the Welsh spelling of a bumblebee. We have dumble drones and dumbledores in different parts of Devon, a gwennen in Cornwall, and a bumbog in Ireland. One of my favourite actually is the Scots Gaelic, which is a Shalan. Bumblebees are called Shalan. And the rather rare great yellow bumblebee is the Shalan Morbui, which is the most magnificently named bumblebee in the world. Of course, Dumbledore is very famous. He got his own show in Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling apparently envisaged him as humming busily around the corridors of Hogwarts, and that's why she chose the name Dumbledore. But as I say, the word bumblebee only came into being in the first part of the 20th century. Traditionally, they were called humblebees. Not because they were humble, but because they hum as they go along, humming along. Incidentally, the noise that a bumblebee makes is not the beating of its wings. It's the noise of its flight muscles vibrating in its thorax. Shakespeare, he said in Florence and Cressida, full merrily the humblebee doth sing, till he hath lost his honey and his sting. He knew nothing about beekeeping. Bumblebees do not make honey. And also, if it's a hit, he wouldn't have a sting, because males don't have stings. He knew nothing about insects. He was quite good on words and stuff. Now, a lot of what we know about bumblebees, or humblebees, was written by somebody called Sladen. And he started studying bumblebees when he was 13 years old. And he wrote the actual definitive work on bumblebees when he was 16. It was published when he was 16, and this is what it was called. We weren't really big on titles then, actually, but it is still the best work on bumblebees, actually. And a lot of the bumblebees that he described have actually gone extinct since then. But he knew more about bumblebees then than we do now, in many ways.
Sorry, when was that?
Then he was born in 1876. He published that when he was 16. Yeah. He subsequently moved to Canada to become a professional beekeeper. And apparently, tragically, he was doing a lot of heavy lifting work one day, as you do often in beekeeping, and he took a dip in Lake Ontario, which was very cold. He died of a heart attack. It's very sad. Anyway, bumblebees, if you know from your Beatrix Potter, read there Beatrix Potter? I'm taking the tale of Mrs. Tittlemouse. It's about obsessive-compulsive mouse, right? Obsessed with keeping her house clean, and she was infuriated by this humblebee, or bee, called Babbity Bumble. And she hated this, and apparently Beatrix Potter did not like flying insects either. So anyway, so Babbity Bumble was the humblebee that kept messing up her nice clean house. And the word has stuck since then, and we now call them bumblebees. So anyway, bumblebee versus honeybee. Bumblebee. Sticking its tongue out, funnily enough. And honeybee. Both very different, of course. This one is very hairy, this one is not hairy, a few hairs, but I say this one is descended from, originated in the Himalayas. This had a more subtropical origin. Lots of differences between them. I mean, they're both social insects. So unlike wasps, for example, bees feed on, they feed their larvae on protein, and in bees it comes from plants, from pollen, unlike wasps where it comes from animal protein like caterpillars and so on. And that's about as close to as they get. Everything else is different. In terms of colony size of a honeybee colony can be anything from up to 50,000 bees. A colony size for bumblebees can be as low as 50, maybe as high as 400, but certainly no more. The fundamental difference, and it's why bumblebees don't make honey, the bumblebee colony dies at the end of each summer. The honeybee colony lives on, and it does that because it lives on honey. It stores the honey, and that sustains them over the winter. Bumblebee colonies die out. The queen lives a year. When the new queens emerge, they will go off and hibernate and emerge the following spring. But the colony will die. In terms of physiology, these are big animals. They need a lot of energy. And it's said that a bumblebee is always only 45 minutes away from starving. And it's quite common to see them. You might see them on the path or on a plant, and they just seem, oh, I can't go anymore, I can't. And you can revive them by giving them sugar, a sugar solution. Leave them for a bit, because they do need to rest, because they use an awful lot of energy, 1.2 kilojoules of energy per hour. And but if you see a bumblebee that is on the ground and clearly exhausted, try giving it a bit of sugar solution, just 1-to-1 sugar, white sugar, not brown sugar, and it will probably revive it and it'll fly off. Because they are big, because they are furry, they operate in much lower temperatures than honeybees. And bumblebees will come out, can forage as low as 4 degrees, lower if the sun's shining, and also in rain, whereas honeybees will only come out typically when it's ideally above 12 or even 14 degrees. Communication. You've heard of the waggle dance of bumblebees? Well, like me, bumblebees don't dance. Or if they do, it's only on the inside. There is no waggle dance involved for bumblebees. There's a lot that isn't actually known about how bumblebees communicate. We know something about how they leave chemical traces on plants so that they're not double visited, as it were. But there is no obvious sign of internal communication within the nest. The queen is very different as well. Honeybees have this incredible split between egg laying and rearing. So in every other insect, or every other species probably, it's taken on by the one female. In honeybees, you have two castes. You have the queen and the worker. The queen lays the egg, the workers raise the eggs into larvae. The queen takes no interest in that, she just lays eggs. The queen bumblebee will actively rear young. She's basically a single mother. That's stretching the analogy a bit, actually. But when the queen bumblebee emerges in spring, and she starts her nest, she will lay eggs, and she will then incubate the eggs, and then she will fly off to find forage to feed them. She will do that until the first brood becomes mature, then she hands it over to them. She is also monandrous, which means she only mates once, whereas the honeybee queen is polyandrous, or some say hyperpolyandrous, because she can mate up to 30 times. Actually, interestingly, the male honeybee can only mate once. Male bumblebees can mate any number of times. They probably don't, actually. And you get the wide diversity of, as well as wide diversity of species, you've got 24 different species. The workers actually range quite a lot in size. So a honeybee is a honeybee is a honeybee. They all look pretty much the same. You can get about 50% divergence in size between worker and bumblebees, which can make them species very difficult to identify sometimes. Here's a quiz for you. Now, what do you think these three have in common? You've got an Attenborough, a garden bumblebee. You can tell it's a garden bumblebee because of the shape of the face, but we'll come on to that. And a blue whale.
Oh, that's a threat.
No, tell me that so. No, actually, close, but no. They're all warm-blooded. Yeah, it it didn't used to be believed that insects could be warm-blooded, but they are. Larger insects like bumblebees, dragonflies are actually warm-blooded. They have a higher than ambient body temperature. They maintain their body temperature at 35 degrees, which is not that different to our own. Now that's kind of easy if you're an Attenborough, or more so a blue whale, because the internal size of the blue whale is insignificant compared to the surface. So it's much easier to keep warm if you're large. It's very, very difficult to keep warm if you're small. So how do they do that? Well, in two ways. And here are two bees that are not common in the UK. You'll notice these are very hairy. This is Bombus polaris, the Arctic bumblebee, which looks like he's wearing a caftan. That is the hairiest bumblebee. This is the biggest bumblebee, Bombus dalbombi, which is in the high Andes in Tierra del Fuego. It's about that long, about 4.5 centimeters. It's described as being like a large flying ginger mouse. I would love to see one. They are threatened. So yeah, they wear a coat. That's the first way they keep warm. They wear a coat, which is very sensible. The second way is that they are insulated. So in the thorax, this area, where the wings are, they have air pockets. So they have little packets of insulation, which keeps the heat in. Which actually causes another problem. This is David Attenborough on a motorbike. This is a white-tailed bumblebee. What do you think these have in common? Yes, who said that? Yes, they do. How do they move fast? Well, they rev. They both actually rev at 12,000 RPMs. So when Attenborough's on his bike, he really moves it, I can tell you. But the bumblebee beats its wings at 200 times per second, which is 12,000 RPMs, which generates a lot of heat. So you need a heat exchanger as well. So as well as coolant in there, they've got a device which enables them to pump cool blood from the abdomen into the thorax. So it's like a machine that cool blood is constantly going into here to keep the temperature. They are very susceptible to rise in temperature, bumblebees. So if we look at the bumblebee here, so they come out early. So you'll see your first bumblebees emerging in February, probably earlier if it's got a really mild winter. First ones out will probably be the buff-tailed bumblebee, and you'll see the queens, big bees, zigzagging around on the ground, looking for a nest site, but most of all foraging. And it's a very difficult time for them because they need to find some food quickly. Key food are catkins, male ones for the pollen, female for nectar. And they need to find food fast. They've been hibernating for, in some cases, up to 9 months. It's one of the longest hibernations in the animal kingdom. And there's a huge mortality rate during hibernation, up to 90%, through rot, through rain, through damp. And there's actually a nematode worm that actually specialises in finding and burrowing into hibernating bumblebees. They will find a nest site, which may be an old bird box, in your case. Different species prefer different locations. The tree bumblebee likes bird boxes, so does the early bumblebee. The garden bumblebee likes to nest under loose planks in a shed or in a compost heap. Buff-tailed, white